Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week kicks off the beginning of year number 2 for the channel, and we're going to start year number 2 the same way we started year number 1, with another issue of Spawn, so let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in August of 1993, and yes, for those of you keeping track, this should have come out in May of 93, but Todd, like everyone else who founded Image, was having trouble meeting deadlines. The cover on Spawn number 13 is a little bit weird. It's not that it's inherently bad, but I don't know. For some reason, there's something about it that I just can't get my head around that I'm not into. You've got Chapel featured down here. This comes hot off the heels of us just finding out that Chapel was the one who murdered Spawn, for now anyway. I believe the concept is that Spawn is inside of a church, perhaps, and this is an altar, which is why there's the candles. But then you've got, like, the skulls, and, Spawn's got the glowing hand and everything. Again, nothing about it is inherently bad. It just, I don't know, the layout maybe is what I'm not into. There's just something about this cover that just seems off. I can't put my finger on it. Story and art, Todd McFarlane. Letters and editor, Tom Orzechowski. Color, Steve Oliff, Ruben Rude, and Ollie Optics. We see here on the first page that the page itself is really pretty bland. It's a lot of exposition. This is Spawn's way of trying to remain focused. He's actually hiding out inside of Youngblood headquarters, waiting for Chapel to show back up so he can confront him. We also see that his power level has now dropped to 7,926, and he even states in this opening monologue that he's actually become aware of what level his power is at and is completely cognizant of the fact that he has drained about 20% of the power that he has, which of course is not good, because when it runs out, his soul goes right back down to hell, and he is then completely in the service of the Mabalja. We also see down here around the corner, there's a few little sound effect blurbs right here, and a speech bubble from someone else in the other room who is very enthusiastically trying to kill some enemies. We then see that all of the little pox and blips and the speech is coming from none other than the newly named Badrock, who of course is a team member of Youngblood and is kind of slacking off on his duties so that he can play his new video game on the giant vid screen that's in Youngblood's headquarters. And he's just having fun trying to break a record as he accidentally breaks the controller, which is a common enough occurrence that he's very upset because they don't seem to be able to build a controller that can withstand his super strength, I guess. And also because every time he replaces it, they dock his pay for it. We also get these long portions of exposition here that are just kind of explaining the backstory of Chapel and Spawn, aka Al Simmons, kind of giving you a feel for the relationship that they had, and also a way of Spawn to kind of go into his motivation for not liking Chapel, not just for the fact that Chapel did murder him, or at least that's the story currently, but also for the fact that, Chapel was kind of a jerk at times, even at one point offering to, take Wanda off of Al's hands and, give her a roll in the hay, knowing how much he actually loved his wife. This comes from Chapel being a real, hardcore womanizer, the way it's described. And from what we've seen in the issues of Youngblood that we've looked at, if you haven't seen those, feel free to check out my Youngblood playlist. This is a common theme that goes on where Chapel's a big fan of the one-night stand, if you will. As we see Badrock very upset because he was about to finally beat the game and now he can't because his controller is broken, his pity party is interrupted by none other than the team leader, Shaft, who this is such a weird drawing of him. I don't know what was going on here with Todd, like, but it just seems like a really strange rendition of Shaft. Shaft is, of course, checking in to make sure that Badrock is doing his job, monitoring the security footage and not using it to play video games, which, of course, Badrock lies and says that he's on the job. No slacking off here. As we see Spawn's cape in the background here, as he's been camped out, hiding inside of the headquarters, and because of the fact that he no longer has a heat signature, none of the sensors inside their headquarters have picked up on him. And he's just been, biding his time, waiting for Chapel, knowing that at some point Chapel would have to come back here. As we then see inside of the training facility, Chapel, Die Hard, and Shaft are, kind of trying to get the reps in. Chapel actually is rather upset at how easy all of this is. However, Die Hard informs him that the new droids that are supposed to be way tougher have arrived, and Chapel's super excited about it. However, Shaft interrupts and says that they have to quit to go to a meeting. Chapel says that that's not going to work for him, that they can quit if they want, but he's going to continue to train. And at this point, we're going to have to address the elephant in the room. Chapel's knife is absurd. I don't recall which issue specifically Rob started drawing Chapel with this super weird, I don't know, just piece of, shrapnel as a knife. And oddly enough, I'd also like to point out that even in this book, Todd is the one illustrating this whole book. Rob's not doing any kind of illustrations for any of the Youngblood characters. Todd draws this knife in a different manner in every single panel that it appears. You can see in all 4 of these panels that while the basic shape is there, the actual spikes and weird cuts and angles and stuff are not the same in any one of these panels, which I don't know if he did that on purpose, but it would be really funny if he did. We then see Spawn slowly approaching the training facility, as outside of the door he once again speaks the name Wanda to remind himself of what Chapel took from him and why he's here to do what he's about to do. As we see him approach the door, and then we see a large slam as he enters the room, cape and chains billowing. He even states that they seem to be acting of their own accord, almost as an extension of his own rage, as the members of Youngblood and he kind of have a standoff. They, of course, have no idea who Spawn is. They've not encountered him up until this point. And we see here that Shaft states that he needs to freeze and give himself up, and they're immediately going to have a boatload of agents in the room to join the offensive against him. However, Spawn, without even blinking, just says, "Make your move." I'd also like to point out that you can kind of tell here where Todd was taking some shortcuts. We've got several panels that, there's not much going on here. Like, this is an entirely black panel with just eyes. Then you have just a silhouette of a hand with no background. And this background is just a couple of lines. And once again, nothing here. The bottom third of the page is just a word. And even on this next page, we see, no background right here in this training facility that they're in. And I have to feel like at this point, Todd is really starting to get bogged down with the workload and realizing that between trying to, write and draw and ink a comic book while at the same time having a wife and a new child at home, and also, the day-to-day goings-ons at Image that he has to take care of. Plus, I can't remember if this is right around the time he was trying to get started with Todd Toys, which became McFarlane Toys later on. He had a lot on his plate, and it's kind of starting to show, I think, in his work, especially the last several issues, I should say. And you can go back and check all those issues out in my Spawn playlist if you feel like it. But starting around, I think, Spawn number 11 is when you really start to see where he takes a lot of visual shortcuts. And, backgrounds just kind of become like a solid color, or, aren't all that detailed, as a way for him to try and just crank this stuff out as fast as he can. The tension then comes to a sudden halt when Badrock smashes through the door of the training room right behind Spawn, telling them that he saw that something tripped one of the alarms to the training room and wondered what was going on and if the rest of the team needed any help. He then looks over at Spawn and mistakes him for a new recruit to Youngblood and tells him that he has a cool cape. Spawn, taking advantage of the confusion, decides that this is the point he has to make his move, and despite the fact that he knows he needs to conserve as much of his power as he can, he decides to use his abilities to teleport himself and Chapel as well. As he suddenly disappears, the rest of the team members now have no idea where he went, and then Badrock points out that Chapel is gone as well. Shaft wastes no time springing into action. He tells Die Hard to do a quick sweep of the facility to make sure that there are no other intruders. He then yells at Badrock, but calls him Bedrock by mistake, and Badrock quickly corrects him. I think this was kind of just a joke. Todd, from what I've read, told Rob Liefeld that there was really no reason to change the name from Bedrock to Badrock. Rob was afraid that Hanna-Barbera potentially was going to bring a lawsuit against him because right around this time is when the original Flintstones movie came out that had John Goodman in it. And he just was like convinced that Hanna-Barbera was going to, come after him, which I don't see how they could have. Bedrock is just a regular noun. It's not a word that they can just copyright like that. But for whatever reason, Rob decided that he'd rather just err on the side of caution and change his name to Badrock. He tells Badrock to, get everything ready, that they're going to mobilize. And Badrock also states that he's going to try and see where the tracking device that Chapel has on him at all times is at so that they can pinpoint his location, as all of them spring into action and just, make an immediate charge to try and take out this guy who just showed up out of nowhere to attack Chapel. However, Shaft does, think to himself, this is only if Chapel doesn't kill him first. So they have a lot of confidence in Chapel's ability. He's no pushover, and they really think that, Spawn's in just as much danger as he is. Meanwhile, back in Queens, we are teleported to the home of Terry Fitzgerald and Wanda Fitzgerald, as this comic is taking place in the exact same time as the previous comic. So we see Terry kind of struggling with what's been done to him, as Jason Wynn sent some, agents to his house to kind of intimidate him, as Jason believes that Terry is the one who stole the files of Al Simmons and has been snooping around, when in actuality, Spawn was the one who perpetrated these acts. Terry is completely unaware of why he is on Jason Wynn's bad side and is very worried about not only his safety, but more importantly, the safety of his wife and child, as he's struggling, pacing about in his room through the night. His wife wakes up, Wanda, and asks if there's anything that she can do, if it's something that he can talk about. He tells her that it's nothing that he can talk about with her yet. This is mostly because he wants to get to the bottom of why he has incurred the interest and potential wrath of Jason Wynn, as he decides to walk down the hallway and check on his daughter. And we get a sense that, Terry's really frightened here. He's having trouble dealing with the fact that, his family is in danger, and not only does he not necessarily have a way to protect them, he's not even sure why they're being targeted by Jason Wynn in the first place. We're then teleported to New York City's 12th precinct, where Sam and Twitch are still on desk duty, not able to hit the streets. They're still under investigation for the death of Billy Kincaid. Even though they themselves had nothing to do with him being killed, his body was, wrapped up in chains and strung up in their office. So it did really kind of create problems for them. We've got Sam here taking a report from a woman who's going on this long ramble about a fight between her husband, and their neighbor, and how their neighbor tried to kill them with a chainsaw and she stabbed him with a butcher knife. And it's just kind of this weird oddball kind of, I think it's supposed to be humorous because Sam is completely disengaged until Twitch comes in and tells him that the investigation into them is going to wrap up tomorrow, and after they're cleared, they can hit the streets again. Sam is very excited to hear this because he is pretty intent on finding out just exactly who Spawn is and where he's at, because he wants to, figure out what's going on with him. Sam and Twitch being really kind of the only people that have any knowledge of Spawn at this point, other than the homeless guys that he lives with in the alleyways. We then see that the teleportation of Spawn and Chapel has landed the two of them in a jungle in Botswana. Now, this isn't just any jungle. This is the jungle in which they were on the mission where Chapel murdered Spawn. Once again, Chapel's knife is a slightly different design with a big spike that's pointing backwards at him. Always a plus when the blades that you're carrying have spikes that point at you, the user. If any of you have ever watched the channel Scalagrim on YouTube, he goes into a lot of detail about goofball fantasy weapons like this. It's funny. I recommend his channel if you've never watched it. It's entertaining and also educational. But I mean, seriously, like, I don't know what's going on with Chapel's knife here. You look at the Daedric weapons in Skyrim and you think, man, these are crazy. What edgelord drew these? And then you see Chapel's knife and you're like, oh, never mind. Those are really conservative in their appearance. Spawn asks Chapel if he recognizes this jungle. Chapel rebuts that, of course not. He doesn't pay attention to the scenery when he's on a mission. He's more there to get the job done and kill who he has to kill. Spawn then states that, of course, because Chapel only cares about killing, he doesn't care about, anyone else around him or paying attention to the surroundings. He's just there to go in, kill who he has to kill, get the job done, and pretend that, nothing happened as a result. We then see that Chapel states that, Spawn doesn't know anything about him and he doesn't know what any of this is about. Spawn then tells him that, in a lot of ways, Chapel's the one responsible for making him who he is currently, as while Mabalja did take advantage of his death, Chapel was the one that caused it. He then drops his cape as he wants to square up against Chapel and fight him on his own terms, even though he could literally just use like an energy blast and kill him immediately. That's not his goal here. He wants to let Chapel know that he can beat him in a one-on-one fight. We see Chapel lunge forward with the knife. However, Spawn dodges the blade and then rebuts with a punch in his face after Chapel calls him nuts. Spawn takes, some offense to this and tells him that, he hasn't been listening, that he's taken everything from him and he doesn't even remember it, which is just kind of infuriating him. We then see that there is a Spawn poster by Walter Simonson. And we see here that it is a vertical fold-out poster. I do like that he's drawn the spikes on Spawn's bands a little bit larger. And we notice that he's got a triple spike on his hand instead of a double. And it almost seems like this is kind of a little bit of a prelude to a costume change that is very, very close to happening within the pages of these comics. And we'll see more about that going forward in future episodes. On the next page, we see, it's not really an advertisement, but just a little blurb about a bunch of awards that the guys who are working on Spawn got. Todd McFarlane, Steve Olive, Tom Orzechowski. Now, these are all, fan-given awards voted for, but, it's still nice to know that the fans appreciate your work. And it was cool of, Todd to just kind of throw this in and be like, hey, thanks for, letting us all know how much our work matters and how much you enjoy it. I thought that was a cool little thing to include. We then see Spawn tear his mask off as he screams at Chapel to look at what he made. And, you know, kind of just going off, again, telling him about, how much he's ruined his life. Chapel says, once again, he doesn't even know who this guy is, and that, despite the fact that he's telling him he's dead, it doesn't matter to him. He's just going to take care of business now. Until Spawn brings up an old nickname that he had for Chapel, which was the Don Juan of Killers, meaning, he kind of relating back to how he was such a ladies' man and always, having all these one-night stands, but was also a ruthless assassin. This, however, startles Chapel as he realizes that the only person that would have known to call him that or bring it up would have been Al, as he suddenly realizes that he's confronting someone who should be dead. We then get a glimpse of a flashback from Chapel's perspective as it shows when he is given the order to kill Simmons on the mission by Jason Wynn. Jason, of course, just wanting to get Simmons out of his hair. But he gives Chapel some story about how Simmons is using his position and his clout with the president to basically steal secrets from the U.S. government. Chapel, of course, doesn't look into any of this. He just accepts the mission with no questions asked and decides to just go ahead and kill a guy who was supposedly his friend. As we see the two of them sitting at a bar, he even buys all of Al's drinks the last night they're together. The next day, when they're out on the mission, we see Al charging into battle, guns blazing, as Chapel hangs back, preparing to betray his friend, and then just comes up and nonchalantly shoots him directly in the face with a laser pistol, killing him instantly. This is, of course, quite different from the origin that you would have seen if you watched the Spawn movie, but that's a whole nother thing that we'll get into eventually. We then see in 1987 all of the different news reports of Al's death being brought up by the three personalities that we've come accustomed to seeing up until this point. The one thing I find strange is, so this news report is supposed to take place in 1987. And it's inferred here that Al was the one who thwarted the assassination attempt by John Hinckley, who's the guy that tried to murder Ronald Reagan. But it refers to Reagan as the former president. So the timeline's a little wrong here, because in 1983, George H.W. Bush would have still been the president, and he was elected in 89. However, it refers to the thwarted assassination attempt as an attempt that was made against the former president. So either Todd's dates were just off, or he's implying that Reagan didn't win re-election and that there was another president between him and George H.W., or this is just completely fictitious, and he's just, got his own presidents. However, that doesn't make sense for him to bring up John Hinckley if that was the case. I don't know. I got a little confused in this part, but, it's possible that he's just blending reality with fantasy. I don't know, but that's the story he was telling, and maybe I'm just reading too much into it. We then get back into the battle as Chapel snaps out of it and lunges forward, punching Spawn in the face. Spawn then is thrown up into the air by Chapel as he then dunks him under the water to try and apparently drown him. However, this is kind of a weird thing because, Spawn has told him that he's back from the dead, and Chapel says that he's going to kill him again. But, I mean, it's a guy who doesn't breathe or whatever, so Chapel's kind of like, I guess, getting confused by his emotions. And who wouldn't be? I mean, this guy is someone you murdered 5 years ago, and now he's confronting you. As Spawn quickly regains the upper hand, grabbing Chapel, throwing him upward. Chapel, I don't know, somehow got a hold of his knife again, as we see him ready himself to, take out Spawn one more time as he lunges forward. Spawn doesn't even try to dodge this attack and just takes the knife straight through the chest, which of course does nothing, as we've seen Spawn get his heart ripped completely out in previous issues. He's fine, and then states that, you know, Chapel's just wasting his time as he pulls the knife out of his chest and tells him that, there's nothing that he can do to stop Spawn from killing him. However, Spawn tells him that if he wanted him dead, he'd already be dead, and that's not why he's here. He wants to make sure that he teaches Chapel a lesson that he will never forget and forces him to live with the ramifications of the poor decisions that he's made. We then see Spawn slowly start to approach Chapel as he throws Chapel's knife away. He is, preparing to finish this fight as Chapel lunges forward, not realizing that he realistically stands no chance of defeating Spawn, as Spawn easily thwarts him, punching him, knocking him back, punching him again. And then we see him light up his hand with some sort of energy power and grab Chapel and pin him to the ground with his hand over Chapel's face. This is something that he's going to use to even the score, as he states, as we hear Chapel scream out. Spawn then takes the transmitter that Badrock spoke of and gave it back to him. I forgot to mention earlier, when they landed in Botswana, Spawn deactivated this transmitter so that the other members of Youngblood wouldn't be able to interfere. However, they teleported instantaneously from Washington, D.C. to Botswana. It would take hours for Youngblood to get there, even in the fastest jet, but sure, whatever. He had to make sure that they'd be good to go for 30 minutes or so. He then turns and walks away and tells Chapel that he wants to now see if Chapel can, keep his wits about him after what Spawn has done to him, and whether or not he's going to continue to be the good soldier, or if he is going to let his own personal vendettas take control of his life. We then see the plane from Youngblood transporting the team, as they have now been able to pinpoint Chapel's location, as Badrock and Shaft run to Chapel's aid to find out what happened. And they unfortunately are greeted with a pretty gruesome sight as they realize that their teammate is in need of medical attention and is definitely dealing with something, as his attacker is gone and he's left to sulk in his defeat. And here on the final page of the story, we see that Spawn has basically burned the top layer of skin off of Chapel's face and recolored the underside to white, I guess, to give him the permanent appearance of the face paint that he wears while on missions, and permanently disfiguring him, also giving him the jagged, sharp teeth. And this was just basically Spawn's way of making sure that, Chapel wasn't going to be able to just charm women and get them in bed with him. And since he has no real family or friends, that was like the one big thing that was really kind of the most important to Chapel in his personal life. And now that's gone from him, and he has to live the rest of his days in this disfigured form. We then see that the return of the Violator will be happening in the next issue. On the next page, we see more image info. This, once again, it's just little blurbs about upcoming comics that are going to be released. Nothing really special going on there. We then move on to the spawning grounds, of course, the letter section for the comic. I'd like to point out that BJ Masoy, I don't know how to say his last name, was the winner of the contest to determine who Spawn's killer was. This was an ongoing contest that had been happening to try and figure out who his murderer was, and the first person to mail in a letter with the correct guess and explanation of how they came to that conclusion was going to win a prize package. So congratulations to BJ. Most of the rest of these letters are standard fare. However, one of them brings up basically the same point that I made in terms of Spawn number 11 being a rather lackluster book. He really puts into perspective that the other guest writers who had been writing up until that point, which would have been Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman and who was the Dave Sim, all did a really good job with their books and had really super interesting one-shot stories that, even though they weren't necessarily super tied into the ongoing narrative, they fit into it amazingly well and really expanded upon the Spawn mythos. Neil Gaiman, of course, introducing multiple new characters. Alan Moore giving a full explanation of what the world of the dead was like in the Spawn universe, and Dave Sim going into this long type of explanation of what the comic book industry was in the symbolism of creators not being able to control their characters because of the companies they worked for, and how they were creating all of these timeless characters that would outlive them, but weren't able to necessarily see the true fruits of their labor due to the contracts that they had signed. It was a really interesting book. And then you get to Frank Miller's book, and it's just this super generic like gang war thing that has no lasting effects in the Spawn mythos, and just kind of goes by the wayside as it's really just kind of ignored going forward. And it's funny to see someone else point that out, and Todd kind of tries to run interference for it, saying that oh well, Frank's only got one issue to work with. It's like, well, yeah, but so did those other three guys, and they all did a great job with it. It feels like Frank Miller just kind of phoned it in. And that's also the first issue that I really noticed that Todd was starting to kind of take some shortcuts with his artwork as well, where he wasn't drawing detailed backgrounds in every panel, and was just trying to get the thing cranked out. And again, he took off the writing duties of those 4 issues because he wanted to be able to spend time with his wife, as I think this was around the time that their first daughter was born. And it's understandable, but at the same time, it was an issue that really didn't hit. It's probably my least favorite. Well, not probably. It's definitely my least favorite issue in the first year of Spawn, or the first 12 issues, I should say, of Spawn. And I feel like that's the case for most people. We then get the fan art page where Todd took time to print art that was sent into him in the last couple of pages of the book. I always thought this was a cool idea, especially for, readers, that you might get your work published in an actual comic book. We see multiple images of Spawn. We've got Chapel here, fitting for the issue. Mighty Man, who is from Savage Dragon, but I think we haven't been introduced. Well, no, we have been introduced to Mighty Man in the Savage Dragon issues that we've covered so far. If you'd like to know more about Savage Dragon, check out my Savage Dragon playlist. We've got Blood Wolf. He, of course, making his first appearance in Darker Image, and then Blood Wolf #1. I have videos on both of those if you'd like to check them out. The Max, I have a Max playlist if you'd like to check it out. A Death Blow playlist if you'd like to check it out. We then have some Wildcats and Pit characters depicted down here on the bottom. Have playlists on both of those if you'd like to check them out. What I'm saying is I'm trying to cover all my bases on the different, image properties from the early years and get as many videos as made as I can about those different comics. So hopefully when the tie-ins happen, you can go and watch videos about those comics and learn some stuff about that if you like. On the final page of the book, we see an advertisement for Team Youngblood. I don't know how many issues of this, or even if I have any issues of this book. Rob was doing some weird stuff with Youngblood where he was trying to make a lot of different series based on the Youngblood characters, which I understand there were quite a few characters involved in Youngblood, but between the main Youngblood comic, Team Youngblood, Youngblood Strike File, it just seems like a lot to be focusing on one superhero team. But then again, this was also at the same time when there were like 10 X-Men publications, so maybe he was just following the trend. And then on the reverse inside cover, we see an advertisement for Wildcats #5, which we will get to on this channel eventually. Issue number 3, I'll probably be making a video of in the near future. But, it's just one more thing on the very long list of a very large number of comics that I have to get to and make videos about. And that was Spawn number 13. And I actually like this book a lot. It's a really good story that they had been building up to for over a year at this point. And it stinks because it doesn't really hold any weight to read it now, 30 years into the future, because we now know that this part of Spawn's story had to get retconned because of a whole multitude of reasons that I don't have time to get into in this video, but we will go over it as we come across the comics that have to kind of navigate around that. It's unfortunate because this was actually a really cool story point of Al Simmons being betrayed by someone he really believed was a friend of his, and him then coming back from the dead as a Hellspawn, figuring out that it was Chapel who had murdered him, and then going and enacting his revenge, and not killing him, but actually just, permanently disfiguring him and forcing him to spend the rest of his life with this weird skull face that he would forever have to, deal with. It was an awesome idea, and unfortunately that idea just kind of, doesn't really matter anymore. And I hate that because I really liked this original storyline of explaining the murder of Al Simmons, and to know that it goes away is unfortunate. But, on a side note, on a happier note, I just want to thank everybody who's been watching so far, all the people who are subscribed currently, for, being with me through this first year and, kind of witnessing me go through some growing pains of trying to figure out how to do this type of work, and, just watching videos about comics that you care about and maybe comics that you didn't care about or didn't know about and wanted to learn some more stuff, which, by the way, is the whole purpose of this channel to begin with. I just wanted to have a spot where, I could give people a chance to learn about books maybe they had never read or never heard of, and, introduce people to comics that I like and I kind of wish had more respect throughout the comic book reading community, as it feels like a lot of people kind of just use the independent books as, just the fodder of jokes, and, just kind of overlook it because it's not being published by Marvel or DC, when in reality, there's a lot of cool books out there and a lot of cool stories that are being produced by, smaller independent companies that you would never get from those major publishers because of either the subject matter, or it's just too off the wall, or it's just something that doesn't fit their quote unquote brand. And, I like being able to, educate people into knowing that these kinds of books are out there. And I just really wanted to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to, make a video that goes up once a week and potentially, share something with all of you. I have no plans of stopping in the future. We're going to see what the future holds. I hope this second year goes just as well or even better than the first. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.